I recognize that I am part of the national media. So therefore, I am a little self-conscious about the fact that the national media has really been sucking its thumb on this story and hasn't much caught on to it yet. The national media has been really behind on this story, but local media have been taking notice of these fights everywhere they're happening. And local media everywhere this weekend took notice of these protests that happened in more than 180 different locations all over the country. And I'm just telling you right now, file this for future reference. Someday, when this signature sort of landmark turn against the Trump administration goes down in American history, when somebody in the future, looking back at this time, finally figures out that this was actually a really dramatic and important thing. When sometime in the future, somebody figures out that Donald Trump, when he got back into office, he tried to build himself a huge archipelago of prisons to hold people without trial. And he succeeded in getting Republicans in Congress to give him billions and billions of dollars for it. And his administration really did make all these secret, ominous warehouse purchases all over the country to do this for him. Someday, somewhere, someone in the future is going to marvel at the fact that despite the fact that Trump got back into office after everything about him, despite the fact that he got funding for this thing, despite the fact that they bought these things, somebody in the future is going to marvel at the fact that none of these things ever actually got opened. That Donald Trump did not get his archipelago of prison camps to hold people outside the legal system. And the reason he didn't get it is not because he didn't try hard enough, but because people all over the country stood up and said, no, not here. You cannot do this. We won't let you. You, sir, have a lot of bad ideas. This is the worst one, and we're not going to let you do it in our town. Someday that history will be written about this moment in American history. And when that history is finally written, I can tell you right now, all the footnotes in that history are going to be to like Blue Sky posts from local activists and Substack articles from local activists and archived stories from local newspapers and little straight to the point YouTube clips from the local TV news stations we keep being told have all gone away, but they have been covering this even as the national media has fallen down on the job. And so I'll show you some of what I know. Here's Mount Kisco, New York this weekend, protesting this weekend against Trump's ICE prison camps out in the cold and the rain on Saturday in Mount Kisco, New York. Here's Anchorage, Alaska this weekend, where they had signs naming and shaming their Republican members of Congress who voted to fund ICE's expansion. Here's Colma, California this weekend. With the banner that you see there, Stop ICE Warehouse Detention. Here's Tucson, Arizona, protesting this weekend against Trump's ICE prison camps. They're outside the office of their Republican Congressman, Juan Ciscomani, in Tucson. Here's El Paso, Texas, where the largest existing ICE prison is already up and running. It is not one of these warehouses they want to build. It's a tent facility that they built at Camp East Montana in El Paso. It has a horrific record of prisoners dying and infectious disease outbreaks. El Pasoans this weekend turned out in big numbers. They marched from the gates of Camp East Montana to the local Homeland Security offices, saying no to Trump's ICE prison camps. There were protests against Trump prison camps in Marietta, Georgia this weekend, and in Conyers, Georgia, and in McHenry, Illinois, and in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Communities, not cages. In Portland, Maine, there were protests. In Portland, Maine, Trump's federal agents took a 19-year-old nursing student and locked her up in one of these ICE prisons. And Portlanders this weekend were out on the street saying, we want her back. There were protests against Trump prison camps this weekend in South Lake, Texas. There was a big protest this weekend in Salt Lake City, Utah, outside the governor's mansion. Salt Lake City is one of the places they are trying to build another one of these huge warehouse Trump prison camps. There was another really big one in San Antonio, Texas. In San Antonio, people rallied in front of the warehouse site itself, including local Catholic clergy and local elected officials. San Antonio has been pulling out all the stops locally to try to stop this thing that Trump's trying to do to them. Local news reports say that, even though it's Texas, so they're not going to get any help from their state government, local news reports say that city officials in San Antonio are not only passing resolutions trying to stop this thing within their own power, they're also currently taking legal advice on whether they too, as a city, can bring the kind of lawsuit that has been brought by the state of New Jersey, by the state of Michigan, by the state of Maryland. This weekend and over the last few days, we saw a whole bunch of protests in the Northeast, specifically against Citizens Bank, which is based in the Northeast. Citizens Bank has hundreds of millions of dollars invested in companies that run these immigrant prisons for Trump. In a statement, Citizens Bank said in part that it does not comment on specific customer or client partnerships. They said, we, quote, regularly review our partnerships and evaluate clients against applicable laws, regulations, and our internal risk standards. That's how they have tried to sort of deflect attention from this matter. But it has not succeeded. This was the scene at their shareholders meeting in Providence, Rhode Island. And all over these past few days, protests at Citizens Bank branches asking the bank to drop these investments. From, as I said, headquarters in Providence to Northampton, Massachusetts, to Great Neck, New York, to Saratoga, New York, to Wilmington, Delaware, to Plymouth, New Hampshire, to the Bronx in New York City, to Queensbury, New York, to Roslindale, Massachusetts, to Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. All over the Northeast, people over the last few days have been protesting at Citizens Bank branches and at their shareholders meeting, protesting against Citizens Bank over their involvement with Trump's immigrant prisons. And I'm showing you things. I'm showing you these things you might not be seeing elsewhere. Not only because this is the news, this is an important part of the story of how the United States is responding to this presidency, how Americans are spending their weekends these days now that Donald Trump is back in the White House with this agenda that he has. But I'm also showing you these things are happening because I think it's important to get our heads around the fact that these folks are winning in this fight. Trump has not been able to open a single one of these warehouse prison camps, despite setting aside $38 billion to try to do it. They have not yet been able to open a single one of these warehouse prison camps, and I don't know if they ever will. They know the public is against them. Despite what they say, that does matter to them. They've made clear over and over again since the start of this administration, they would prefer to do things that are easy. And right now, this is not easy. The American people all over the country, even in red states, have made this a thing that is hard for them to do. And so they're not getting it done. And this is important not only in terms of thinking about the tactics of the American people saying no to this president, this phenomenally unpopular radical president, but it's also substantively important in terms of what kind of presidency this is going to be, because it would be a phenomenally radical new power to give this particular president, right? All these prison facilities to hold thousands, to hold tens of thousands of people who have never been convicted of a crime. That would be an incredibly radical power to give President Donald Trump. And I'm sure that is why the Trump administration would love to do it. But so far, despite their best efforts, it is really not working out for them. Mike Riston and Miles Taylor are working together, among a lot of other folks, on a new project called Get the Facilities Out, GTFO-ICE.org. It's nationwide. They're calling it a rapid response network to stop ICE prison camps before they start. If you go to maddowblog.com, we have a link to what they're describing as their action guide. It basically leads you through what to do when ICE comes to your town. Do you have an ICE enforcement surge in your town? Click here. Do you have a secret warehouse purchase in your town? Click here. Does it look like they're going to be trying to do some sort of voter intimidation in your town on election day? Click here. It's really practical, well-designed, well-resourced, well thought out. And it is coming at a very auspicious time for this kind of a fight. Joining us now, two guests. I never do this, but here are Mike Riston and Miles Taylor. Gentlemen, I'm really, really appreciative that you were both able to be here. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Mike, let me start with you. I know that the project is using your Project Saltbox data to track where new ICE prison camps are being planned, where they might be in the process. Tell me about your decision at Project Saltbox to join up with this larger effort. What are you hoping that members of the public will do with the kind of information and data you guys have been able to dig up?
Yeah, from the beginning, our mission has always been to put data in the hands of every single American citizen that cares about this issue so that they can use that data for good. And, it's kind of funny that Miles and I are working together, but we truly believe that this is a bipartisan American issue. This is not a progressive issue. This is not a Democratic issue. This is a American issue. And the way that we are going to put an end to these flagrant constitutional and legal violations, as we've seen with the ruling in Williamsport and suits being brought in other jurisdiction, is by banding together American and using data and every tool at our disposal to organize and push back against this encroachment on our rights, this violation of our fellow citizens' safety, and to make sure that we're doing all that we can with the resources that we have to be effective in that fight.
Miles, you have been a very high-profile critic of Donald Trump and therefore one of his targets for years. Tell me about your thinking about focusing on this issue, fighting the Trump prison camps. Why is this important to you, and what do you hope to be able to accomplish working together?
Well, first, Rachel, I have to say, no joke, this is partly thanks to you because I had seen your segment with Michael. And our team at Defiance was thinking, how can we do more in this space? And so, as Michael knows, after I'd seen coverage of this, I started trying to get into his DMs. I was like, how do I get to this guy? And Michael protects his information well. So I'm trying to hunt him down and say, we want to work with you. Let's use this data to alert Americans about these facilities. And frankly, Rachel, to crowd cancel them. I mean, I've experienced this before all throughout politics. Usually it's in a bad way when people are getting canceled. This is a good thing to go cancel these facilities. And it's clear in the communities where it's been successful that crowd cancellation, that outpouring of frustration is enough to get municipalities and real estate developers and folks to take a beat and say, is this really what we want to sign up for? And on a personal front, Rachel, look, you know this about me. I saw these facilities. I saw them up close. I know what kind of detention capacity DHS needs to actually secure the country, and it ain't this. I mean, what most Americans don't realize is DHS will have more detention capacity if they go through with this plan than the entire federal prison system. The size of Salt Lake City, Utah. Imagine the whole city of Salt Lake surrounded and every man, woman, and child in federal custody. That's how much detention space DHS will have. And my former department does not need that much detention space to go arrest violent criminal folks who are in this country undocumented. It does not. The math doesn't add up. The math only adds up if you're trying to build a police state.
Wow. If you're looking for ways to punch your moral dance card at the moment, if you're, say, Paul Weiss, with your radioactive Epstein Files chairman stuffed into the back office where you hope no one notices him, where your firm is literally described now as the face of capitulation, right? When you're trying to avoid a picture of your firm appearing in the history books in the chapters on the shameful cowardice of the once vaunted and powerful American legal profession in the face of the tiniest nudge from a tin pot dictator. If you are Paul Weiss or you're another firm that's in that boat, you have the opportunity to have a very big and very important 2026. Because the very contingent, as yet undecided fight over whether or not America is going to let Donald Trump build a huge new constellation of black site prison camps in this country, that is a fight that needs legal firepower, that needs pro bono lawyers donating their time. There's representing people who are already in the existing camps. A record number of people being held right now in what we know are atrocious conditions. There's also representing people with habeas corpus petitions, right? Non-lawyers hearing that phrase don't know what I'm talking about, but lawyers instantly know what that is, right? The administration defying court orders was supposed to be such a bright red line for the vaunted American legal profession. Well, where is the administration defying court orders every day? Courts all over the country, from Minneapolis to Massachusetts, say that federal court orders are being violated every day, over and over and over again, specifically when it comes to the Trump administration arresting people and locking them up indefinitely without any chance to go to court to be heard, which, of course, is the basis of the writ of habeas corpus. They're not supposed to be able to lock you up in prison without putting your case before a court. In Massachusetts, one federal judge last week went so far as to order the Trump administration to advise every single person they arrested and locked up, to advise them in writing and in multiple languages, that every single person the Trump administration is locking up has the right to petition a federal court to review their case and potentially set them free. The judge ordered that the Trump administration needs to give every single person they lock up written notice of their right to a habeas corpus petition in a federal court. And then she ordered that within 3 hours of anybody being given that notice, they need to be given access to a telephone, quote, to call an attorney. Whereupon, perhaps, they could call Paul Weiss. Perhaps big law, which has a lot to make up for now, perhaps big law could dig down deep and try to find its soul somewhere amid the tidal wave of habeas corpus petitions that ought to be filed by all these thousands of men, women, and children Trump is arresting all over the country and locking up literally without due process, without any access to the courts. And why is he doing that? Well, he's doing it in part to create an artificial need for tons more space in Trump prison camps, which they are trying to build in huge numbers right now. Where else could big law help? Big law could also help in the fight to stop Trump building new prison camps. Put that Project Saltbox tracker back up there. You see at the very top there, you see the map there, and we'll get into that in a minute, but you see at the top, essentially the bottom line, 7 warehouses that ICE has bought so far to become Trump prison camps. 7 bought so far. 5 warehouses where the sale has been blocked by local opposition. 11 warehouses where it's up in the air. They are trying to buy warehouses to turn into big Trump prison camps, but the fight is still underway, still contingent, still yet to be determined. Hey, American big law, you looking for your lost reputation? Because right now, the future size of Donald Trump's archipelago of massive black site prison camps is being determined by fights in tiny little towns, by individual local officials, by angry local residents, and tiny, no-resource local activist groups that are trying one by one to stop the next Trump prison camp from being built in their town. And they could use some help. And they're doing a good job fighting it in all sorts of ways. And it's the least partisan thing you can possibly imagine. I mean, one proposed Trump prison camp in Byhalia, Mississippi, appears to be canceled now after local protests and after Mississippi Republican Senator Roger Wicker expressed his objections to it. One proposed Trump prison camp in Oklahoma City appears to be canceled now after local protests and after local officials leaned on the private company that was going to sell that warehouse there to ICE that they ought not do that. In Surprise, Arizona, after a Rockefeller Group warehouse was bought by ICE, there's been a ton of local protests there. Even MAGA Republican Congressman Paul Gosar has been among those expressing concerns about that warehouse becoming a prison camp in his home state. In Chester, New York, the fight is on over a warehouse owned by an entity associated with Carl Icahn. Locals are protesting there, including tonight. Local officials say the local sewer system, among other things, cannot handle anything like the size of that prison camp that Trump wants to put there in New York. In San Antonio, Texas, after Oakmont Industrial Group reportedly sold its warehouse to ICE, among the local Texas officials expressing their outrage and their determined opposition is the top elected official in Bexar County, Texas, Judge Peter Sakai, whose family was incarcerated in prison camps during World War II for the crime of being Japanese American. He says that is what led him to public service. He says he is absolutely opposed to there being a new ICE prison camp in Bexar County in San Antonio. In El Paso, Texas, the nonpartisan city council there unanimously approved an action plan to try to find a legal way to block another one of Trump's planned prison camps in Clint, Texas. Plenty of local opposition, plenty of protests, plenty of bipartisan outrage. And you know what they could use? They could use some big-time legal firepower on their side. In Orlando, Florida, it's a firm called HLI Partners that's being pressured for potentially brokering a sale to ICE for a prison camp in Orlando. In New Hampshire, a member of Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte's cabinet resigned today in scandal after Governor Ayotte, again a Republican, said she didn't know that ICE was planning on building one of these prison camps in Merrimack, New Hampshire. And this cabinet official's agency apparently did know, but nobody told the governor. And so now that cabinet official is out. In Social Circle, Georgia, even a Republican congressman like Mike Collins is saying no to a prison camp in Social Circle that would potentially triple the local population there. That's a town of 5,000 people. They want a Trump prison camp there that would hold up to 10,000 people. We're going to talk with Democratic U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff about that and more in just a few minutes. Whether it is the Epstein moral disaster or the capitulating to a would-be dictator moral disaster, or any of the other moral disasters of 2025, of the first year of Donald Trump being back in office, this year, 2026, the second year of Trump being back in office, shows that his approval has never been lower, his party's electoral prospects have never been more dismal, the clarity with which the country views him and his administration and his intentions has never been more clear. Trump has never been less powerful. The agenda he's pursuing has never been more evident and more unpopular. What this means if you're a wuss, what this means if you were wrong in 2025, in the first year of Donald Trump being back in office, well, it means that 2026 is good news for you. 2026 is the easiest chance you'll ever have to rectify what you did wrong, to get on the right side of this thing. Now or never. They got something like 3,000 people at the public square in Hagerstown on Saturday. And in Hagerstown, the banner for their protest wasn't just no kings, it was no kings, no camps. And that's because it's just outside Hagerstown where the Trump administration is trying to put one of their giant Trump prison camps to hold thousands of people indefinitely and without trial. And Hagerstown has been, and the rest of Maryland has been trying as hard as they can to stop it. So, and that led to kind of an interesting local dynamic. In Maryland, unlike in every other state where people were just expected to go to whatever No Kings protest was nearest to them, in Maryland, a grassroots group called the Maryland Coalition to Stop the Camps asked people in Maryland, Maryland residents, to come from all over the state, specifically to Hagerstown, to show opposition to this particular prison camp that Trump is trying to put just outside that town. So it was no kings, no camps in Hagerstown, Maryland. And I got to say, there's a piece of that story that is worth watching right now that Kristi Noem has been ousted as Trump's Homeland Security Secretary, and this new guy, the former Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin, is taking over. One of the things that has emerged about these warehouse purchases they're making for the Trump prison camps is that, for some reason, the Trump administration appears to be eager to wildly overpay for these warehouses that they're buying, even before they start spending to convert them into prison camps. So like in Salt Lake City, they paid nearly 50% more than the property appeared to be worth. This warehouse facility was assessed at roughly $97 million. For some reason, the Trump administration decided they wanted to pay over $145 million for it. Why is that? Roxbury, New Jersey. The warehouse they bought there was assessed at $62 million. The Trump administration came in and offered them $129 million. More than double what you'd expect to pay for it. One of the warehouses they bought in Georgia was valued just last year at $26 million. The Trump administration came in and bought it for $129 million. Assessed at $26 million, they came in and paid $129 million? What's going on there? What's going on there? Well, I will just point out two other things that are going on that might shed a little bit of light on this ultimately. Number one, the Washington Post obtained an internal memo that apparently circulated last week, the day after Markwayne Mullin was sworn in as the new head of Homeland Security. That memo reportedly said that the process of turning these warehouses into Trump prison camps is going to be slowed down, that the proposals for these facilities are going to be revised, that they're going to start incorporating feedback from stakeholders whatever that means, before they move ahead with these Trump prison camps. Why is that? Why are they slowing down? What's up with that? Well, turns out simultaneously we have learned that there's a new Inspector General investigation into alleged corruption at the Department of Homeland Security. The soliciting and handling of contracts, quote, including the involvement of former Secretary Kristi Noem and her de facto chief of staff, Corey Lewandowski. There was already an internal audit that had been sparked in the department for some reason, but now on top of that, there's a new and apparently quite urgent, quite aggressive investigation, which apparently included investigators searching the offices of one Homeland Security official last week, an official who had been reportedly placed in her DHS job by Corey Lewandowski and Kristi Noem. After NBC News recently reported that Corey Lewandowski reportedly sought multi-million-dollar payments from companies that were contracting with Homeland Security, including specifically companies that operate immigration prisons. He was seeking multi-million-dollar payments for himself from those companies as he was acting as the de facto chief of staff at that agency, including an unusual degree of oversight of contracts. I mean, Mr. Lewandowski denies this, but Democratic members of Congress have now opened their own investigation into what may have been going on there. So I'm just, you put these things together, I'm just going to say, hey, you guys, anybody wondering why it is that they slapped an extra 60, 80, $100 million on top of the price tag for these Trump prison camp warehouses they're buying in multiple states? Through totally opaque processes that make no financial sense whatsoever on their face? Yeah, you guys maybe want to slow that down a sec? 3,000 people in the Hagerstown, Maryland public square would like you to slow that down for sure. Social Circle, Georgia, town officials put a lock on the water meter at the warehouse the Trump administration is trying to turn into a prison there. I think they'd like you to slow it down a little bit, take another look. The city council in Salt Lake City, Utah, just voted to cap the amount of water they'd be allowed to use at the warehouse they want to be a huge prison there as well. That's one where they appear to have overpaid $48 million for that warehouse for no explicable reason. Yeah, maybe they'd like you to slow that down, take another look at that one as well. Why'd they overpay for all these things in such a rush? Why'd they overpay by tens of millions of dollars at one of these things after another? Who made off with all of that money? Whose pockets just got stuffed with the tens of millions of dollars in taxpayer money that is unaccounted for in almost all of these transactions? Yeah, you think you might want to slow it down a little bit? That stink is what you think it is. It smells like corruption, which, you know what, kings and dictators on their golden toilets are quite famous for.